Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today we have Alice and Ivinya by Skype from the United Kingdom with her latest release, Feathers of Snow. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. So give us a little bit of background on Feathers of Snow and how it all came about.
So it's inspired by the German fairy tale, The Goose Girl, which is the sort of fairy tale I think you either know or you don't. So I had it read to me as a child growing up. So it's one that stuck in my head. And it's always been one of my favourite fairy tales. So I really wanted to write my own retelling of it. So that's where the idea for it started. But I knew I wanted to put on a bit of a different twist to it than maybe some of the traditional fairy tales.
You definitely did the twist. So Grimm first published that in 1815-ish.
Yeah.
So did they read you the really dark version? Because you made it just as dark.
I read through a few versions. I think looking back, I'm quite shocked at the version I read when I was about 8 or 9, which was the one that I don't think it is a one made for children, so it's a little bit easier to read than the original, and it was illustrated. But it still had some of the very dark moments in it, like a dead horse head talking above an archway, and also the horrible bit where the main baddie says that she wants the protagonist to be dragged through the street in a barrel of nails until dead. And I think for an 8-year-old, that's quite hardcore, but I didn't seem to bother me as a child.
Well, you can see how you got it to be so dark. I love the whole premise that, you're constantly looking at the reflection of who you're becoming.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part to almost all fairy tales. It's all about often being in a horrible situation, but not letting the situation turn you into a villain, but instead staying true to who you are and therefore actually coming through it stronger on the other side. And I think that's the essence of most fairy tales. And I wanted to reflect that in my own stories.
It came across really strong. So what about the spirit animals?
Yeah, I'm not completely sure where they came from. I really like Princess Mononoke, which is a Studio Ghibli Japanese animation film. And even though I wasn't completely thinking about them when I came up with the idea, I think that certainly my love for Studio Ghibli in general and Princess Mononoke's affected it. I think the way they came out mostly was because I wanted to keep Falada from the original fairy tale. So I needed a talking horse, which obviously is not normal. So if I was going to have a talking horse, I needed to create a whole culture and a whole world where I could have a horse that could talk. And that's why I came up with the whole idea of spirit beasts. But it moved quite far away from the original talking horse by the end of it, with all the different ideas.
Well, I thought it worked really well because the princess, we won't give anything away. So her relationship with the horse,
yes,
I thought that was really true to how horse owners are with their horses. Although I don't think they really talk back to them, but it was believable. And then you had some terrifying, tragic moments where jealousy and greed took everything away from her. How did you come to twist it that way?
I always like my books to be quite dramatic. So I think that's part of the element, is I tend to lean towards the dramatic anyway. But part of it is because of the original fairy tale. Almost all the negative things that happen are because of another character's jealousy. And I wanted to keep that as true. And also, I loved, as much as I love my main character, Brianna, I do put her through a lot of horrible things in the series. So, but I wanted to show that actually, even when you feel like you are weak and the world is against you, and even when thing after thing happens, you still have that choice of giving up or becoming a villain, or you can keep on going, standing for what you know is right, and follow that path instead. But yeah, Brianna certainly has to make a lot of hard choices in the book, and decide what she thinks the right thing to do is.
Why did you make it a strong underlying theme that even if you think you can get away with it, lying isn't the best choice? And I love how you twisted in incidents where that happened a lot. Do you have young children that became an important theme for you?
So I do have a 2-year-old, almost 3. Those only in the last week learnt how to lie. So they are very interesting lies at the moment, which are very clearly not true. Normally that someone else has told him he's allowed to watch TV or something like that. But I think it is something where I think Brianna's life would have been a lot easier if she had gone on with a lie. But at the same time, living a lie, I think, is something that destroys you. And I believe that quite strongly, that however badly you want to live a life that's not real, pretend something's real that's not, and lie to everyone about it, actually, the more damage you do both to yourself and the people around you. And it's almost better to say the damage of doing the truth sooner rather than later. And therefore deal with the repercussions and move forward on a cleaner sheet. And I felt, I felt like I needed to bring that through in the story, because otherwise my characters couldn't have healthy relationships. And I wanted at the end for my characters to have healthy relationships that weren't based on lies.
You really did a good job. It was so twisted.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a really enjoyable read. So
I'm really glad.
I also saw that you were an animal vet. So is that why you had, how did that work with your characters that were animals?
I absolutely love animals. So all my books feature animals, often animal companions and animal sidekicks. I think I just can't imagine a world without animals being a massive part of it. And I couldn't imagine a world where you're not close to animals. So I think that comes through in my books. And there's always going to be some element of magic, I think, about the animals that I put in my books as well, in the representing sort of the strong bond that you can have between humans and animals. But I think I have to be a bit careful with my vet background, because I'm so used to blood and guts and things that sometimes I have to massively tone it down in my books, because I forget that it's a bit shocking for normal people to tone it down a bit.
Yeah, there are a couple moments where it was a bit shocking. I was like, wow. And then, you look at your picture online and you're like, wow, she looks so sweet. Not so much. So as a veterinarian, what's your daily life like?
So I work for a charity. So I'm a small animal vet. So I treat mostly cats and dogs, rabbits and guinea pigs and rats, those sort of things. And I work for a charity that treats the pets of people on benefits. I assume you have benefits in the US. People who are helped by the state who are on low income. So it's basically people who can't afford veterinary treatment themselves for their animals. And we give it for either free or reduced cost, depending on what their income is. And so most days, so because of COVID, we're still on mostly emergencies. I normally deal with emergencies all day, either face-to-face with the clients or round the back doing operations all day. And I work 3 days a week because I also look after my son 2 days a week as well. Yeah.
What was the hardest operation you've ever had to do on a small animal?
It's tricky. I've had a few slightly strange ones. So recently I had to remove a lump off a mouse, and the mouse was about that big, and the lump was about that big. So it was basically 3/4 of the size of the mouse. And trying to do the anaesthetic on something that small was quite a challenge, and trying to keep it warm was really difficult. But it did really well. It made a full recovery, didn't chew out its stitches or anything. But it was ever so tiny, like my little sutures, trying to make it all nice. But I've had some pretty epic operations on very big dogs, trying to remove their spleen full of cancer and stuff like that as well. They're the really tough ones. Because they can be really difficult and quite physically challenging as well, because quite heavy sometimes, these dogs.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of people that have mouses and rats for pets, but that was nice.
Yeah, rats are more common than mice. We have quite a few rat owners here.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they're good pets actually, rats, because they're very intelligent. So you can teach them to do tricks and to train them, but they only live for about 2 years. So it's a bit sad because they get people get attached to them and then they go, which is very sad. But they do make really good pets. They've got a lot more personality than rabbits and guinea pigs.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they soft or brittle, like to pet them? Because, picking up rats is not my thing right now.
They're not as soft as a rabbit. They're probably the same as a guinea pig if you've ever stroked a guinea pig. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting the impression you're not much of a small mammal fan.
Okay, cats, dogs, birds, but rats, I don't know. Guinea pigs are cuter than rats. That's what it is. Yeah,
guinea pigs are cuter than rats. That's true.
So they're not as trainable.
I do like rats. I don't own rats, but I do like rats because they're, to be honest, they never ever bite. Whereas a lot of the other small animals will bite. So I prefer the rats. The hamsters all bite. Rats are much nicer.
Oh, wow. So when did you know that you wanted to be a veterinarian? Did you always know?
Always, yeah. It was ever since I was videos of me at 4 years old saying that I want to be a vet when I grow up. So, and then close after I said, I want to be a vet and an author. So I've been saying that since about 5 or 6 years old. It's not really changed ever since.
And back to the books. How does that all fit in? How many will be in this series?
So that's a trilogy, that one. So actually the second one just came out of that trilogy, Feathers of Blood. And then Kingdom of Feathers is the last one, which is coming out in March.
So Alice, how many books have you written in all?
So I've written roughly sort of 10, 11 books, depending on how you count them, because some have been released as both 3 books and 1 book. So the Feathers of Snow is going to be a trilogy, and that one so far has been my most popular. My second most popular is a Pied Piper retelling, which starts with Silent Melody and then goes to one called Enchanted Melody. And then I've written my 2 sort of original books, as it were, as Ivinya. It's called The Flawed Princess and Queen Avon, which aren't fairy tale retellings, but are a similar sort of vibe and still romantic fantasy. And they're my main ones.
So how long have you been writing? How long does it take you to finish a book?
So I started publishing fantasy in 2019, but I've been writing fantasy for a long time. So I wrote my first full-length book at the age of 11, which was about a magician who was really bad at magic. And it is, reading back, it's the most embarrassing, strange thing ever, because I was so naive. So I have sort of 14-year-olds getting married and having people sleep in the same room as them at night, not thinking that's weird, and all this sort of stuff. So I published The Flawed Princess in 2019, and it now takes me about 4 months to go from start to finish with a book if I've got an idea, of which 6 weeks of that will be writing it, and the rest will be beta reading. I've got 3 different editors and advanced reader copies and things like that. So that actually takes longer than writing it half the time, is the editing and going through the process, making sure it's all ready.
It was really well written.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It just played out so well. And you were like, no, don't make that choice. What are you doing?
The ending is painful, isn't it?
It was
I've read
painful.
it back before.
I was like, But it was really good. So how did Retelling, where you're keeping true to several elements that came up in the first story, but you're making it your own, where it's completely different?
Yeah, I think so. For the Goose Girl, because I had it as a child, there was a big nostalgic element of it, where there were certain parts of it that had really stuck in my head, all the way from childhood, and they were the little facts and the little details that I wanted to keep. So things like having a talking horse companion, and for some reason the handkerchief with spots of blood from the mother, a talking dead horse's head, and this would be a spoiler for anyone who doesn't know the Goose Girl, but the fact that Falada dies, really stuck in my head as a child, and the fact that in the original, the pretend princess wants the real princess to go in the barrel of nails and dragged around until dead. I think those are the facts that I really vividly remembered from reading it as a child, and so to me, they were the things that made the Goose Girl. And the innocence of the main character. So I had that aspect of it, and then I thought about what's the feel, what sort of feel do I want it to have, and so that's where I came up with the world that they're in, and I wanted to have quite a cold, brutal feel to it, to be a nice complement to the innocence and the sweetness of the main character, to show that being sweet and innocent doesn't make you weak, and actually you can. And it's about her survival, really, and how you can stay innocent and good and truthful even in difficult environments.
For world building, were there any places that you had traveled to as a child or an adult that created that winter landscape for you?
Yeah, there's loads of places that inspired it. Again, I think for me, it's about the feeling of places rather than necessarily the physical details of them. I've traveled a lot, especially as a young teenager. So I've traveled to China, to Hong Kong, to New Zealand, South Africa. I've traveled to America, Germany, a lot of Europe, Italy, the Netherlands, Prague. So I think I've been to quite a lot of places in the world, especially as a teenager. And I think that the thing that you can never quite describe is how a place feels. And it's that feeling that I've always wanted to capture, and I suppose take away with me. And that's what I try and put into my books, is the feel of a place that that is in some ways familiar, but otherwise utterly different, and how that can be so overwhelming to start with, but actually can become something that you've become familiar with, and actually can enjoy. And certainly a lot of the characters were inspired by my time in China, and just the world being in many ways a little bit simpler, but with much more of an honor culture. But also just the hills of Scotland and Wales, where I've spent most of my holidays, that wildness, and the wildness of the forests and the mountains, especially the Highlands in Scotland, have influenced pretty much all my books, because there's a real wildness, even though UK is very heavily populated. There's still a wildness in these places that you almost feel like you can go back in time, and that you can almost feel like you're back with the Celts and the Saxons and the Vikings and things sometimes, and the woods still feel very magical. And I've always loved to try and capture that feeling in my books.
Well, I definitely think you did that. And now that you mentioned Scotland, that definitely makes sense. Because
I do love Scotland. Yeah.
That whole, the way that you walk through, the mountain ranges and things like that, where there's really nobody, but it does have that wild feeling. That's awesome.
Yeah. You
can definitely see how it all plays out in your books. It really does have an international flavor to it.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm hoping that's going to feel even stronger throughout the trilogy, with more and more culture clashes, basically, between different peoples having to learn where their similarities are over their differences.
I thought you did a really good job with that part too, especially when Brianna came into this new culture at the beginning, and just blending in, trying to understand, asking questions, so you're appropriate. Yeah. She did a really good job with that.
It was really fun pretending to be like creating a world and then putting a character in it who had no idea what was going on. Really, it was quite fun, because it's almost like putting yourself in a world where you've got to figure it out for yourself, because there's many aspects that I wasn't sure about at the beginning. So it was fun being able to work them out with the main character sometimes.
That's wonderful. How long does it take you to write one book?
So actual writing, about 6 weeks. It takes me 3 to 4 months to edit it and to get it through all because I have 3 editors and I have a beta reader team as well, who are all absolutely fantastic.
How do you feel when you're getting feedback from them?
Oh, I'm quite a tough cookie. It takes quite a lot to upset me. So I just want it all. I want it all, and I want it like without any restraints. And I'm very lucky with my beta team being actually quite international as well. And you get some blunt cultures and you get some sort of slightly more fluffy, nice cultures. And it's nice having people from both to sort of weigh it out in how they give criticism. But I like the whole reason I use my beta readers is because I want to find all the bits that I could do better. So I want them to tear it apart and say things that could be better. And I'm quite happy with that. It doesn't normally upset me unless they criticize one of my characters, and I'm like, it's my baby, leave her alone.
That's funny. But I love the way that the whole thing comes out to the summation that the only way to be free is to be yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. It's a great young adult fantasy novel.
Yeah. And I think Brianna is so strong as a character, but she just doesn't see it and she doesn't recognize it because she is so defined by the things that have happened in her past.
Yeah, that was pretty evil, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like horrifyingly evil. I was just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Eliana, who's the main baddie. So to start off with, she was milder, But then I had to have the scene where she wanted the main character to be dragged through a city in a barrel of nails until dead if I wanted to keep in with the original fairy tale, which I did. So I was like, if this has to feel like it doesn't come completely out the blue, so I need to make a villain who would actually say that and it not sound ridiculous. And that's, so I had to, it was actually my wonderful developmental editor helped me with that. She said, you need to go all the way back and make her so much worse. Which I did. And actually, I had so much fun making her so much worse, making her horrible. And I don't think I've had so many messages from my readers about a character before, because I just got bombarded after Feathers of Snow was released with people wishing her bloodthirsty endings and and wishing that she was dead, basically. And all these readers are normally really sweet, lovely people, all asking me to kill this character.
Wow, that must be, that's intriguing. The way that the flashbacks that Brianna has to her youth growing up with this person, and you're just like, wow, what an evil villain. She's a villain we just love to hate. So thanks.
Yeah. No, she's yeah.
We just
horrible.
want some justice.
Yeah. Don't worry, it is. Yeah, all my books end up with happy endings overall. So just to take the stress out of them, I do tell people that.
Well, that would be nice. She does deserve something. I mean, she put up with everything. I think she did it for. I think most of her choices were because she didn't really find another way out. And she just had to go with the flow and see where things turned up in some. But yeah.
I think, because Brianna has experienced so much trauma. I think often people don't make sensible decisions. They just try and survive and then have to discover themselves again.
Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing so much about how you crafted Feathers of Snow.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great young adult novel that'll keep people tuned in, Feathers of Snow is definitely a series you want to check out. We'll see you soon.